Welcome, David, General Baptist Church Online. This is Pastor Tim, and I am so excited to be with you today. My goal is to encourage and equip you in your journey with Jesus, no matter where you find yourself in that journey. Have you ever struggled with your faith? If you're like anybody else on the face of this earth, most likely you have, because it doesn't take too long for us living in this sin-cursed world, dealing with the stuff that we deal with, to stumble and to trip up in our faith. And some of our faith have suffered because we've lost a loved one, or maybe we've experienced betrayal in our lives. Maybe that's from humans, other people, or maybe that's from God, and we feel betrayed by God. We feel lied to. Maybe you have experienced abuse from somebody who you should have been able to trust, but you learned that you could not. Maybe you haven't received something that you've prayed for, and so that's impacted your faith negatively. Maybe it's impacted how you pray. Maybe it's impacted how you follow God. Maybe it's impacted what you believe is true about God. And so today we're going to talk about, what does faith teach us? What does faith in Jesus Christ teach us? And we're going to be out of Hebrews chapter 11. I wanted to, over the next 2 weeks, I was wanting to preach out of 1 Timothy, and I had a plan, and I had a message that I was working on. And I just, honestly, as we go into this week of our reading plan, because we're reading through the New Testament in a year, we're in Hebrews chapters 11 through 13 to finish up Hebrews. And then we go into 1 Timothy chapters 1 and 2. And I just couldn't get past Hebrews chapter 11. As I kept reading through it, I'm like, man, we need to study this. We need to dive into Hebrews chapter 11. So that's where we are. And so I'm hoping and I'm praying for you, for your faith in God to be strengthened today. Maybe you have no faith in God. Maybe you're not following God. And so today is a day that I'm praying for you to come to salvation, for you to come to Jesus Christ and place the hope of your eternity in heaven with him, to place that in him today, and to turn your life over to him. And so in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, what is faith? Faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It's the evidence of things we cannot see. So faith is reality of what we hope for. It brings to reality the things that we just hope for. We can believe that they're real. That's what faith is. And it's the evidence of things that we cannot see. And so faith truly is believing that God's character, that he's able to fulfill his promise. And so it's really answering the question, who is God? Who do you believe God is? A lot of the times we say God is good all the time, and all the time God is what? Good. But do we believe it? Sometimes we go through this life and our hearts are hardened because of the things that we experience, and we start questioning, is God good at all? Is he real at all? Is he living? Is he active in my life? Sometimes it doesn't feel like it. Last Sunday night, I told our girls no to a banana muffin. I know. How horrible is that? Lindsay was going out with some friends for a birthday party, and so they were already kind of sad that Mama's going to be gone. And then I told them no for a muffin. And so what we did was, we were going to the creek to go swimming and have supper down at the creek. And as we were going down there, they were in the water swimming, and then they asked for a muffin. And I said no. And they're, how could this night get any worse? Mom's not here, no muffin. But what they did not know about was that I had packed all the supplies for s'mores. I packed the lighter, I packed the starter fluid, I packed everything I needed to start a bonfire and to have a nice hot s'more. What's better on a creek bank than a s'more? Not much. And so nothing yells summer more than that. And this is a summer night, and we were loving it. And so they could not understand why I said no about the muffin. And then they saw me on the bank. I was gathering up some wood. And they said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm starting a fire." "Why?" "Because that's the only way to cook a s'more out on a creek bank, isn't it?" And so they were they were cheering, yeah, but they had to let go of their muffin. Sometimes you and I have the muffins that we hold on to in life, and maybe it's us losing a loved one that's negatively impacted our faith. Maybe it's betrayal that we've experienced. Maybe it's us not understanding God. Just like my girls couldn't understand why I'd say no to a muffin, but they didn't know about the s'more that I had for them. And I guarantee you, God's got so much more for you. And if you just let go of that muffin, place your faith in him, trust his character, trust his nature, trust that he is good. And so my prayer is for you that you figure out that faith is us believing in God's character to fulfill his promises. Faith is living sure of what we hope for. And I love this, living sure of what we hope for. The writer of Hebrews says, faith shows us the reality of what we hope for. It brings to reality the things that we just hope that are off in the distance. And so faith is living sure of what we hope for. I've never been to heaven, but I hope for heaven. And I know that I can count on it. And we're going to discuss those things of how can we know. Faith is living sure of what we hope for. When you and I live sure of what we hope for, that's a source of security. That's a source of confidence that we walk through this life with. And Jesus Christ calls us to the abundant life, and he calls us into the sure life of knowing that what we hope for will become a reality because Jesus Christ resurrected from the dead. Because Jesus Christ ascended to God the Father, and he sent his Holy Spirit to us to dwell within us. And he's given us that promise. He sealed that promise within us. And faith is living sure of what we hope for and finding evidence for that which we cannot see. Remember, the writer of Hebrews says it this way: faith is the evidence of things that we cannot see. And sometimes you and I go through life that we don't look for the evidence. And so that's why I said faith is finding the evidence for that which we cannot see. God has placed the evidence of his goodness around us. He's placed his evidence of his holiness around us. He's placed his evidence of his power, his authority all around us. We just have to look for it, and we will find it. Faith gives us a new perspective in this life. I remember when Emmeline, our oldest daughter, when she was 2 years old. When she was 2 years old, I was at work, Lindsay was at home, and she was holding Emmeline in the nursery, and Emmeline was staring out the window, and Lindsay looks out the window. There's nothing out there. There's no birds. There's no deer. There's nothing out the window. And Emmeline said, "Who's that guy?" Lindsay's like, "What guy? What guy is in our yard?" And Lindsay gets kind of anxious, kind of nervous, as anybody would. "What guy are you talking about?" Emmeline said, "That guy right there. I can see him. He's right there." And she said, what's he look like?" "Well, he's strong and he's powerful." And Emmeline starts to describe this guy that Lindsay does not see. She said, "Well, are you scared of him?" And Emmeline said, No, I'm not scared of him at all." And so you see this going on, and you realize that God was revealing to her that pure children a lot of times see things that we miss because we're not looking for them. Faith is living sure of what we hope for, finding evidence for that which we cannot see. And Emmeline was seeing evidences of God that day. And I'm praising him for that he's revealing himself. And that speaks to me today. And I hope it's speaking to you to slow down and to look for God, to look for the evidence of that which you cannot see. You see, faith teaches us that God's there, and we learned that day that God is there. He revealed it to our daughter. Faith teaches us that God cares about us, and we're going to be talking more about that today. Faith teaches us that he's got good things for us, even when we can't see. Even when we think the best thing we have is a banana muffin, which is good, but it's not as good as a hot s'more right out of the fire. He's got good things for us today. What do we gain through faith? Hebrews chapter 11, verse 2, the writer of Hebrews says, "Through their faith, the people in days of old earned a good reputation." You and I, through faith, gain a good reputation here on this earth. To have a good reputation is something, it feels good to live a life that you don't have to be ashamed of. It feels good to live a life of truthfulness and honesty, and for people to know that they can count on you, and for people to know that you're telling them the truth, and for people to know that you've got their back, that you care for them. It's good to have a good reputation, and because it's truly living like Jesus. You never know and how many people are watching you. People that are following God, people that aren't. They're watching how you raise your kids. They're watching how you interact with people around you. They're watching as you handle tense moments. They're watching how you handle your finances. They're watching everything about you. And what's amazing is that when people watch you, we can actually lead them to Jesus Christ. You see, we have a good reputation when we're following God, and that's honors God because we live like Jesus. In Luke chapter 2, verse 52, it's recorded that Jesus grew in wisdom, he grew in stature, he grew in favor with God and all the people. He grew in wisdom, stature, favor with God and all the people. And through faith, you and I gain a good reputation. Through faith, we gain wisdom, growing wisdom and maturing wisdom in this life to have a new perspective and to be a light for eternity, a light to eternity through Jesus Christ for those around us. And that's what we get to do. That's what we gain through faith. Peter actually says in 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 13 through 17, "Now who will want to harm you if you are eager to do good? But even if you suffer for doing what is right, God will reward you for it. So don't worry or be afraid of their threats. Instead, you must worship Christ as Lord of your life." I love what Peter is saying here. He says, when you're being hated against, when you're being tortured, when you're going through suffering, when you're going through a hard time, when you worship God, that changes your perspective. He says, don't worry. Don't be afraid of people's threats. Don't be afraid of the suffering you're going through. Instead, worship Christ as Lord of your life. And if someone asks about your hope as a believer, always be ready to explain it. When you and I are going through this life and we're joyful and we're filled with a different perspective, a heavenly perspective, that stands out to people. And Peter says, then people are going to ask you, what's the hope that you have? And we have the opportunity to tell them about the hope we have in Jesus Christ. He says, always be ready to explain it. But do this in a gentle and a respectful way. Keep your conscience clear. Then if people speak against you, they will be ashamed when they see what a good life you live, because you belong to Christ. Peter says, if people speak against you, keep your conscience clear. If people speak against you, it'll start not quite adding up to other people to whom they're speaking to. It'll start to be clear because what people say, if it doesn't match up with your good reputation, people will see that it's false, that it's a lie, that it's not true. Can people say that about your life? To have a good reputation. We gain a good reputation, but what I see in Hebrews chapter 11 is that the good reputation isn't all we have. Because in chapter 11, verse 39, at the very end, the writer of Hebrews says, all these people of the faith, Abraham, Sarah, they go through the whole list. All these people earned a good reputation because of their faith, yet none of them received all that God had promised. So they had a good reputation, but they didn't receive all that God had promised. For God had something even better in mind for us. So you see, you and I have something better in God's mind than a good reputation. That means that everything about our life is not all happening in this world. A good reputation happens on this world, but he says, I've got something better for you. I've got eternity with me. And through faith, that's what we gain. We gain a different perspective to know that we are heavenly bound. And we are to keep our eyes on heaven. And faith helps us know that there's more to this life than what we see. There's more to this life than what we see. I thought it was great. Last Sunday, Logan Jones shared as she opened the service about the speed of youth, about how quickly this life goes, how quickly we age. And I had a man over 70 years old in one of our discipleship groups this last week say, I am so thankful that our young adults see how quickly life passes, how quickly life just speeds up. I mean, just right now in this season that we're in, summer is nearing a close. We are toward the end of summer. We're looking toward fall, and it's been so hot and dry around here lately that the trees are actually dropping their leaves. They're turning colors, and they're dropping. And you see that the seasons change, and man, they change so quickly. But through faith, we see that obviously things are changing because we are headed toward heaven. We are headed toward a place that's not like this place. This world will not last. Our lives will not last forever. But through faith, we have a good reputation before God and men, and we have eternal life in heaven. And that's what God's leading us towards. So, what does faith help us understand? What does faith help us understand? There's 4 things the writer of Hebrews points out here that faith helps us understand. First and foremost, by faith in verse 3, we understand that the entire universe was formed at God's command. The entire universe was formed at God's command, that what we now see did not come from anything that cannot be seen. Or what we now see did not come from anything that can be seen. So God created everything from nothing. We see that there is a creator. Faith helps us understand there is a creator. None of us were there at creation. We have to believe in it. And we see through faith that God created everything. And what we see now is the evidence for things we cannot see. You remember the definition of faith at the beginning? Faith is living sure of what we hope for, and faith is finding evidence for that which we cannot see. You see, what we see now is evidence for what we cannot see right now. So we can see the creation of this earth. We can see each other. We can see how the goodness of God in various ways in our lives. But we can't see heaven. We can't see the spiritual realm. We can't see any of that. But we can know it exists by what we see now and say, okay, God's created this. And what do we see in his creation? I love this. We see that God's intentional in his creation. I want to turn back to Genesis 1 and read the account of just the first part of Genesis 1, 1 through 3. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It just stated, in the beginning, God created. The earth was formless. It was empty. Darkness covered the deep waters, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. God was hovering over his creation. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. God said it, and it happened. God created it, and it happened. It just came to be. And we have faith in that. By faith, we understand that the entire universe was formed at God's command, that what we now see did not come from anything that can be seen. He created light. God was intentional in his creation. He spoke, and it created. He spoke, and it happened. And what I love about this is that I can know he's intentional about creating me. And the good news for you is that God has been intentional in creating you. You're here for a purpose. You were created on purpose, and that's by God, and he loves you. God was intentional in his sacrifice as well. His sacrifice for you. He went to the cross for you. That's good news. God is intentional in his calling for you. He's calling you into his kingdom work. And the writer of Hebrews is trying to make us understand that by faith, God has great things for us. And he will do amazing things through us if we're just going to submit to him. By faith, we believe that God created. And through his creation, we see now that he's intentional. We see of how intentional he was and how awesome he is in creating everything we see today and how awesome heaven's going to be one day. Faith helps us understand that there's a creator. Faith helps us understand that this world is not our home. Verse 13, all these people died still believing what God had promised them. The writer of Hebrews points out, these people died. They died with the promise that God had something more for them. They did not receive what was promised, but they saw it from a distance and they welcomed it. They agreed that they were foreigners and nomads here on this earth. Faith shows us that this world is not our home. And I'm so thankful that our young adults are seeing that this world is not my home. I'm just passing through. This age is fleeing. This season is fleeing, and it's so short. But I understand that I'm a nomad here on earth. Obviously, people who say such things, that they're nomads, are looking forward to a country they can call their own. And that's what we're to look forward to. A country we can call our own. A country where we feel known, where we feel loved, where we feel at home. if they had longed for the country that they came from, they could have gone back. But they were looking for a better place, a heavenly homeland. That is why God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. And sometimes you and I get caught up in thinking this world's our home. Sometimes we get caught up in the past, thinking there was a better season, there was a better time, there was a better fill in the blank. And we wish we could go back. But when we realize that this world is not our home, to go back would be to be further away from heaven. And I don't want that, do you? To go back is further away from spending our time with God in eternity in heaven. And so we understand that this new perspective brings life to us. I had a friend this past week that's having heart surgery. And when I went to visit her, she made a statement that just shows she knows this world is not her home. She said, when I go into surgery, I don't know what's going to happen. They say it's going to make it better, my life better on earth, because it's going to fix my heart and the issues that I'm having. But if I pass away, I know where I'm going. If I live, I'll bug you even more for a few more days. And what I love about that is there's a confidence, there's a security in knowing where we're going when we pass from this earth, that we're foreigners, we're nomads, we're heading to a country that we can call our own. And so we look forward. And so friend, today, maybe you've been looking backward and you need to look forward to heaven and put that into perspective into what you're experiencing in this life. Faith helps us understand this world's not our own. It also helps us understand that God's not ashamed of us as his children. Do you believe that? In verse 16, the second part, that's why God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. God's being intentional in his preparation for you for eternity. And he's not ashamed of you. Why? Because if you've asked Jesus Christ to forgive you, you've surrendered your life to him, then his blood purifies you and cleanses you from all unrighteousness. And that's the good news. That God's not ashamed. He doesn't dread to see us coming. He's excited to live with us forever in heaven. And he's excited to live with you. He's not ashamed of you. He's intentionally preparing a place for you without Satan. That should be enough for us to fall down and worship him on this earth. And faith helps us understand that God's not ashamed of us. We can live guilt-free in freedom in this life. Faith also helps us understand that there's promises that you have not received yet. There's promises that you have not and will not receive until you pass from this life and spend eternity in heaven with God. In verse 32, he says, how much more do I need to say it? It would take too long to recount the stories of the faith of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and all the prophets. By faith, these people overthrew kingdoms. By faith, they ruled with justice. By faith, they received what God had promised them. By faith, they shut the mouth of the lions. They quenched the flames of the fire. By faith, they escaped death by the edge of the sword through faith. Their weakness was turned to strength through faith. They became strong in battle through faith. They put whole armies to flight by faith. Women received their loved ones back again from death through faith. He said, it'd take me forever to tell about these stories of faith. But other people were tortured because of their faith. They refused to turn from God in order to be set free. They placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection. Some were jeered at and their backs were cut open with whips because of their faith. Others were chained in prisons because of their faith. Some died by stoning. Some were sawn in half because of their faith. Others were killed with sword because of their faith. Some went about wearing skins of sheep and goats, destitute and oppressed and mistreated because of faith. They were too good for this world, wandering over deserts and mountains, hiding in caves and holes in the ground. Do you believe that today? That you're too good for this world when you follow Jesus Christ. This world's not your home, and through faith, there's promises that you have not received yet. In verse 39, all these people, they earned a good reputation because of their faith. We're talking and telling these stories of faith today. Yet none of them received all that God had promised, for God had something better in mind for us. Through faith, they received their ultimate reward of spending eternity in heaven with God when they pass from this life. There's promises that you and I haven't received yet. Eternal rest. Doesn't that sound amazing? Experiencing the glory of God. You and I have never seen anything like that before. Can you imagine the promises you haven't received yet? The wild conversations you'll be going through. Some of these conversations, these stories of faith that haven't been mentioned, you'll be able to hear those, the whole thing. I'm praying today that as a person of faith, you'll have your own stories to tell. But I don't want you to wait until heaven to tell those stories. God called us right now to live a faith-filled life, and by living by faith, we can teach others what we learn. God's good all the time, and all the time, God is good. So what do we do until we get to heaven? Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, he just shared about all these people of faith in Hebrews chapter 11. He said, since we're surrounded by a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. So this week, today, what I want you to do is strip off any weight that's slowing you down. When we're talking about running a race, you don't run with a huge backpack. You don't run with all this extra stuff. You run with the lightest you can so that you can get the best time, so you can perform the best. Well, God says, strip off every sin that's tripping you up right now. Bring that sin to me, and I will forgive you for it. I'll release you from it. And friend, I want you to do that today, to come to God, to run with endurance the race he has set before you by stripping off all that sin that he has called you to. That's the abundant life that he's called us to today. I'm praying for you this week, for God to bless you, for him to lead you in his grace and peace. And if you haven't placed your faith in Jesus Christ today, just right now pray, God, please show me you're real. God, please show me how to live a faithful life. Read Hebrews chapter 11 and read about people who lived a faithful life, and may that encourage and build you up today in your own faith. God bless. Bye-bye.